It's 2 a.m., and for some reason, you find yourself thinking about your ex.
And then, out of nowhere, your phone buzzes on the nightstand.
You pick it up, and it's them. A text, completely out of the blue. For just a second, it feels like magic. Almost like there's a direct line between your thoughts and the very fabric of reality. It feels like the universe is listening. But what if it's not? What if that powerful feeling of connection isn't some kind of cosmic alignment, but actually a sign that you've just walked into a cognitive trap? So that's what we're going to deconstruct here, the so-called law of attraction. Now, this isn't an investigation into spirituality. It's an investigation into psychology. We're going to explore the idea that manifestation isn't some secret power, but a kind of mirage, one created by the predictable, well-documented glitches in our own brains.
To really understand this, we need to look at it from 4 angles. First, we'll examine the seductive promise itself. Where did this idea even come from? Then we'll dive into the cognitive mirage, all the mental illusions that make it feel so real. After that, the dopamine trap, the neuroscience that explains why it's so addictive. And finally, we have to talk about the moral hazard, the genuinely dangerous side of this belief system.
All right, let's start with the promise. At its core, the law of attraction is built on a very simple, very powerful idea that your thoughts can literally create your physical reality. But here's the thing. This isn't some piece of ancient wisdom passed down through the ages. It's actually a pretty modern invention.
You can trace its lineage back to the late 1800s with something called the New Thought movement, which basically proposed that illness started in the mind. Then, in the early 1900s, that idea pivoted from health to wealth, with books you've probably heard of like Think and Grow Rich. But the version we all know today, that was supercharged in 2006 by The Secret. It completely stripped away any nuance and just presented as a simple mechanical transaction. You think it, you get it. And today it's mutated again, this time amplified by social media algorithms into trends like Lucky Girl Syndrome.
And to give itself a sense of authority, the whole movement co-opts the language of science, right? It talks about vibrations, attraction, energy. But in actual physics, a vibration is a physical oscillation of matter. Attraction, in physics, means opposites attract, like charges actually repel. And energy is just the capacity to do work. It's totally indifferent. The law of attraction takes these words and completely distorts them. It turns them into metaphors where, your emotions have frequencies and your thoughts can magnetically pull objects toward you. It's a fundamental category error, mixing up science with metaphor. Okay, so if it's not based on actual physics, why does it feel so real to so many people? Well, the answer lies in a whole series of cognitive illusions. They all work together, in concert, to create this powerful distortion field around your perception of reality. The very first illusion has to do with a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, or the RAS for short. Think of it as a neural network in your brainstem, and its main job is to act as a sensory filter. See, your brain is processing millions of bits of data every single second, but your conscious mind can only handle about 40 of them. The RAS is the bouncer at the door. It just deletes the rest to stop you from being completely overwhelmed.
So the myth of manifestation tells you that your brain is a magnet, pulling reality towards you. But the scientific reality is that your brain is actually a filter, ignoring almost everything. Here's a classic example. You decide you want to buy a red car. All of a sudden, you start seeing red cars everywhere. Now, you didn't magically attract them. They were always there. You just gave your brain's filter a new instruction. Hey, stop ignoring red cars.
The second illusion is something called apophenia. This is our brain's built-in tendency to see meaningful patterns in what is basically random noise. It's a survival mechanism, really. Our ancient ancestors were way better off seeing a predator in the bushes that wasn't there than missing one that was. But today, that same hyperactive pattern-matching engine misfires. It connects random events, like, say, seeing 11:11 on the clock, and tricks us into assigning them some kind of profound meaning.
And then there's illusion number 3, the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. The name comes from a story about a shooter who fires randomly at the side of a barn, then walks up and paints a bullseye around the tightest cluster of bullet holes to make it look like he's a great shot. And that is exactly what happens with manifestation. You might set 20 different intentions, 17 of them fail, but 3 succeed, maybe through chance or your own effort. You just completely ignore the 17 misses and focus only on the 3 hits, creating a totally false narrative of success.
The next illusion is all about misunderstanding probability. It's what shows us the coincidences aren't magic, they're just math. So every single day, your brain consciously processes around 30,000 distinct events.
Now scale that up. Over the course of a month, that number blows up to about 1 million events. That creates a massive, massive sample size for randomness to do its thing.
And according to a statistical principle known as Littlewood's law, in a sample size of 1 million, you can mathematically expect a 1 in a million event, what we might call a miracle, to happen to you about once a month. That text from your ex? That wasn't the universe whispering to you, it was just a statistical certainty.
Another key illusion here is something called regression to the mean. You see, people often turn to manifestation when they're in a crisis, right when they've hit rock bottom. But the thing about statistics is that extreme states, both good and bad, are almost always followed by a return to the average. So when things inevitably get a little bit better on their own, the law of attraction gets to take all the credit for what is really just the natural ebb and flow of life.
And the final cognitive illusion we'll cover is survivorship bias. It's a huge one. We all hear the story of the one actor who wrote himself a check for $10 million and then years later actually got it. But what we don't hear are the stories from the tens of thousands of other actors who did the exact same thing and are still waiting tables. The failures are completely invisible, and that creates a profoundly skewed, totally unrealistic perception of how often this works.
So all of these illusions together explain why manifestation seems to work, but that brings up another question. Why is it so addictive, even when it consistently fails to deliver? Well, the answer isn't out there in the cosmos. It's right inside our own neurochemistry.
It all comes down to this addiction loop. When you sit there and vividly visualize your dream life, your brain releases dopamine. That's the molecule of anticipation. You're basically getting the high of the reward without having to do any of the work. But then, when reality inevitably fails to match that fantasy, your dopamine levels crash hard. And to escape that crash, what are you driven to do? Visualize again, to get another hit. The act of manifesting itself becomes the drug you use to cope with the failure of the manifestation.
And the whole system is perfectly designed to keep you trapped in that loop. The core formula, ask, believe, receive, is a classic, unfalsifiable psychological trap. Think about it. If you get what you want, hey, the system works. But if you don't get what you want, it's never the system's fault. It's always your fault. You just didn't believe hard enough. It creates this perfect closed loop where the belief is infallible and you are always the one who's broken. And this, right here, leads us to the most genuinely dangerous aspect of this whole ideology. Because when you start to believe that individuals create their entire reality with their thoughts alone, well, that creates an incredibly cruel and narcissistic ethical framework.
I mean, what's the logical conclusion? If you attract everything in your life, then you must also attract your own trauma. The victim of abuse, they must have attracted their abuser. The person with cancer, they must have manifested their tumor through negative thoughts. It takes the just world fallacy and elevates it to the level of an absolute universal law.
And this isn't just a theoretical danger. Look at the real-world example of the Twin Flames universe cult. They weaponized this exact logic. They taught their followers that if a romantic partner they were pursuing rejected them, it was just a mirror of the victim rejecting themselves. Stalking was completely reframed as persistence in your manifestation. This kind of ideology systematically dismantles a victim's connection to objective reality, and in doing so, it makes abuse seem not only justifiable, but spiritually necessary. Of course, this entire system is also monetized, usually through a predictable upsell funnel. It starts with something cheap like a book or a video. When that doesn't work, you're told it's because you have blocks that, conveniently, can only be cleared by a mid-cost online course. And when that fails, well, then you need to join a high-cost mastermind group to vibrate at a higher frequency. Every single failure is blamed on you, which creates the perfect justification to sell you the next, even more expensive solution.
So here's the bottom line. The universe isn't listening. It doesn't respond to your thoughts, and it really doesn't care about your vibration.
And you know what? That is profoundly good news, because it means you aren't to blame for the random tragedies that happen in life. It means that an illness is just biology, not some kind of moral failing. It means you are liberated from the impossible, crushing burden of having to create all of reality with nothing but your mind.
Real agency isn't about trying to control the cosmos with your thoughts. It's about navigating the chaos with your eyes wide open. It's about accepting randomness and building genuine resilience. The real secret is that there is no secret. So stop manifesting, start doing.